My ex-wife's new husband mocked me in front of his friends for being unemployed. They just didn't know I owned the company where they all worked until the day I fired them. I was sitting alone at the bar, enjoying my whiskey, when I saw Amanda with her new husband, Brad, and some colleagues from work. They were laughing loudly, celebrating some deal. Brad noticed me and gave that arrogant little smirk. That smirk quickly escalated into a full-blown session of mockery about my unemployment. Little did they know that 3 months earlier, I had secretly bought CorpTech Solutions, the company where they all worked, the same company where I would soon reveal myself as their new boss. Before I continue the story, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated. I grew up in Seattle and always had an entrepreneurial spirit. While other kids spent their days playing video games, I was building websites for small local businesses. At 22, I had already graduated with a degree in computer science and was running my first serious startup. That's when I met Amanda. She was studying business administration, brilliant and ambitious. We connected immediately, late-night coffees, shared dreams, future plans. We got married at 26, young and full of hope. The first years were incredible. I founded Tech Solutions, a cybersecurity software company that grew rapidly. Amanda supported me completely, understanding the long hours, the dedication, the weight of the decisions. She took care of our personal life while I built our financial future. We were a team, or at least that's what I thought. Around our 5th wedding anniversary, things started to change. Amanda became increasingly frustrated with my work routine. The arguments started small but soon became frequent. She wanted more time together, more trips, more social events. I tried to find a better balance, but Tech was in a critical growth phase. Every decision affected hundreds of employees and millions in investments. The breaking point came on our 7th wedding anniversary. I arrived 40 minutes late to dinner because of an emergency with a major client server. Amanda barely spoke during dinner, and when we got home, she simply said she wanted a divorce. The pain was indescribable. While I thought I was building our future, she was building resentment. The divorce process was draining. Amanda painted me as a workaholic, neglectful, conveniently forgetting the lifestyle my effort afforded us. She walked away with a generous sum in the settlement, and I dove even deeper into work. 6 months later, I discovered she was dating Brad Thompson, the marketing director at CorpTech Solutions, a mid-sized company across town. A year after the divorce, I decided to sell Tech. The company had become a constant reminder of my marital failure. The sale earned me $87 million net. Instead of starting another business right away, I took some time for myself. I traveled, breathed, and reassessed my priorities. During this period, I began quietly investing in several companies. I prefer to be a silent partner, offering capital and guidance without getting involved in the day-to-day operations. But that stance changed when I discovered that CorpTech Solutions was in crisis and looking for buyers. At first, I hesitated. Investing in the company where my ex-wife's new husband worked seemed complicated. But the business fundamentals were good, despite the poor management. The core products had potential. The problem was the leadership. After a detailed analysis, I bought CorpTech through my holding company, keeping my name off all public documents. Only the board and my lawyer knew that I was the true owner. My plan was to improve the company culture and make it profitable, maintaining anonymity, at least for a while. The first few weeks of management left me concerned. Employee satisfaction was rock bottom. Turnover was high, especially in the departments led by Brad and his group of executives. Anonymous complaints described a toxic environment with favoritism, credit theft, and bullying. Brad and his friends were the main culprits, but they had convinced the previous owners that they were indispensable. I decided to observe before taking drastic measures. That night at Sullivan's Steakhouse, everything should have been simple. I was there to meet with potential investors for a new clean energy startup. The restaurant was sophisticated, dimly lit, the ideal atmosphere for business. My investors had already left when I noticed a noisy group being seated in the area next to mine. Amanda looked basically the same, Blonde hair, now shorter, wearing an elegant black dress. Brad was next to her, his arm firmly around her waist. With them were 4 men in suits, all wearing that subtle CorpTech badge clipped to their jacket pocket. They were celebrating something, ordering champagne, making toasts. I paid my bill and was about to leave discreetly when Brad spotted me. His expression immediately shifted from cheerful to something darker. He whispered something to the others, and several heads turned in my direction. I nodded politely, hoping that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Brad stood up, excused himself from the group, and walked over to my table. Up close, the expensive suit and meticulously combed hair made it clear he was the type of man obsessed with appearances. He had the practiced smile of a born salesman. I stood up. I extended my hand professionally. We had briefly met during the final days of my marriage, but this was our first real conversation. I kept my voice calm. I said it was good to see him and hoped they were doing well. That's when the first jab came. Brad said he was surprised to see me dining at such an expensive place. He'd heard I was between opportunities lately. The implication was clear. The tone of mockery was unmistakable. I responded calmly, explaining that I had sold my company and was exploring new projects. He raised an eyebrow and said, "It must be nice to be unemployed and live off past success. When do you plan on getting back to real work?" The words hurt more than I cared to admit. Before I could answer, he waved to his friends. Soon I was surrounded, 5 men in expensive suits, while I was wearing a simple dress shirt and casual pants. Suddenly, I felt out of place and outnumbered. Brad introduced me to his colleagues. "This is Emilio," he said, "the startup genius who decided that working is optional." He made air quotes around genius, drawing giggles from the group. I recognized them from the company reports. Ryan Daniels, VP of Sales, Thomas Ukarai, Financial Controller, Jason Olivares, Marketing Manager, Greg Peterson, Director of Operations. All part of Brad's inner circle at CorpTech. All with poor performance records and multiple complaints against them. And none of them had any idea they were mocking their own boss. Amanda stayed at the table, visibly uncomfortable, but she didn't intervene. Our eyes met for an instant, and she was the one who looked away first. That hurt almost as much as the provocations that followed. Ryan asked if I was hiring a life coach to find my purpose. Thomas suggested I apply to CorpTech, since they sometimes hired people without ambition for entry-level positions. Jason questioned how long my money would last without a steady income. Each comment was accompanied by a cynical smile that never reached their eyes. I maintained my composure, but inside, I was boiling. I thought about the CorpTech employees whose careers these men had damaged, the ideas they stifled, the toxic culture they created, and all of it just to fuel their own egos. Brad then delivered what he thought was the knockout blow. "Some of us need to succeed every day, not just once before retiring into obscurity. Maybe Amanda made the right choice. She went with someone who still has ambition." In that instant, something shifted inside me. It wasn't just anger, it was determination. Those men weren't just insulting me. They represented everything wrong with the leadership of the company I now owned. Their behavior confirmed every single complaint I had read in the HR files. I smiled, paid my bill, and said I had to leave. Brad smiled back, thinking he had won that confrontation. If only he knew what was coming. As I walked out, I heard Amanda reprimanding Brad. That was unnecessary. His reply echoed through the restaurant. He needed a reality check. Not everyone can run away from real life like Emilio. I stepped out into the cool night air, my mind already formulating a plan. The quarterly executive meeting was 3 days away. It would be the perfect setting for what needed to happen. That night, sleep simply wouldn't come. The humiliation replayed in my head like an endless loop, not just for me, but for what it represented. How many employees had already gone through something similar at the hands of Brad and his group? Suddenly, the corporate culture report became personal in a way it never had before. Around 3 a.m., I called James Wilson, my business advisor, the only one besides my lawyer who knew I owned CorpTech. I apologized for the hour and told him what had happened. James had always been skeptical of my idea to remain anonymous, and now he agreed. It was time to act. We spent the next day reviewing every piece of data on Brad and his group. Their departments were consistently underperforming while they appropriated the results of other teams. The turnover rate was nearly 3 times the industry average. Most damning, however, were the exit interviews. 3 employees explicitly named Brad, Ryan, Thomas, Jason, or Greg as the reason for quitting. I also found financial irregularities, nothing illegal but questionable. Corporate accounts used for personal dinners disguised as client meetings, contracts with suppliers full of suspicious clauses and favoritism, resources distributed based on friendships, not necessity. James recommended caution. He said firing them immediately might look like personal revenge. We needed to be methodical, professional, and the quarterly meeting would be the ideal stage, with all the necessary documentation and witnesses. As the owner of the company, I had every right to participate and evaluate my executive team. I spent the next 2 days preparing meticulously. I studied the ongoing projects, the financial projections, and the organizational charts. I created a detailed presentation specifically highlighting the problems in each department under the responsibility of Brad and his friends. I also prepared an immediate reorganization plan to stabilize the company after their departure. On the morning of the quarterly meeting, I arrived early at CorpTech headquarters. The CEO, Arelia Reynolds, was the only executive who knew my true identity. She had been working with me behind the scenes, also concerned about the toxic company culture, but limited by the old ownership structure. We met quickly in her office before the meeting. Arelia warned me that Brad planned to present inflated department results. She had tried to address his performance issues before, but was always undermined by Brad's relationships with the previous owners. She seemed relieved that I was finally taking control. The boardroom soon filled with directors and department heads. Brad and his 4 friends sat together, exuding confidence. They had prepared a joint presentation, taking credit for a small increase in sales that actually came from a product developed by a team none of them supervised. Arelia opened the meeting and introduced me simply as a major investor interested in operations. Brad and his group barely paid attention, scrolling on their phones and whispering with laughter. The disrespect was palpable. When Arelia announced that Brad's team would be the first to present, they stood up with an air of superiority. Brad opened a PowerPoint full of misleading charts and began his rehearsed speech about innovative marketing strategies. The others complimented him with equally exaggerated statements about their contributions. 20 minutes in, I raised my hand. A simple gesture, but it silenced the entire room. Brad looked annoyed by the interruption. I stood up and thanked him for the presentation. Then I introduced myself for real. My name is Emilio Reyes. 3 months ago, I acquired CorpTech Solutions. I am not just an investor, I am the owner of this company. Brad's face lost all color. Ryan dropped his laser pointer. Thomas started frantically flipping through papers as if searching for a warning sign he had missed. Jason and Greg exchanged looks of sheer panic. I continued calmly. I connected my laptop to the projector and displayed the actual performance data for each department. The numbers told a very different story from the one they had presented. I showed employee satisfaction scores, turnover rates, customer complaints, all linked directly to their leadership. For 30 minutes, I presented detailed evidence of mismanagement, bullying tactics, and credit theft. I included anonymous testimonials from employees who feared retaliation. I compared their divisions with data from similarly sized companies to make it clear how poorly their divisions were performing. During the presentation, Brad tried to interrupt me several times with excuses and deflections, but I calmly asked him to wait until I finished. The other executives, many of whom had suffered under his internal politics, watched with increasing attention. When I finished the data, I moved to the consequences. I announced the immediate termination of Brad, Ryan, Thomas, Jason, and Greg for poor performance, ethical violations, and creating a hostile work environment. Security was already waiting to collect their belongings and escort them off the premises. Their access to company systems had already been revoked. Brad finally recovered his voice, stammering about contracts and wrongful termination. I replied that our legal department had thoroughly reviewed everything. The documentation was overwhelming, and none of this was impulsive or personal. The most satisfying moment came when he tried his final card. "You're only doing this because of Amanda. This is personal." I looked him directly in the eyes and replied, "This has nothing to do with Amanda. It has to do with your performance and your behavior. The fact that you insulted me at Sullivan's only gave me a chance to see your character up close. But believe me, the decision would have been the same either way." When security arrived, Brad looked at me with a mixture of shock and hatred. He said, "You won't get away with this. I have friends in this industry." I simply replied, "I do too. The difference is, I treat mine with respect." And just like that, they were escorted out. 5 men who built their careers on intimidation, now completely powerless. The remaining executives were silent, stunned. I seized the moment to present my new vision for the company. Transparency, merit-based promotions, zero tolerance for harassment and bullying, and investment in innovation and employee development. That same afternoon, the news spread throughout the company. I personally visited several departments, introducing myself to the employees. The relief on many faces was evident and gratifying. Some shared stories of lost opportunities, stolen ideas, and credit diverted by Brad and his group. That night, I received a text from Amanda. She had already heard what happened. The message was short. "I didn't know who they really were at work. I'm sorry for what Brad said to you." I didn't reply immediately. Her apology seemed to only address Brad's behavior, not her own choices and attitude during our marriage. I needed time to process everything before speaking to her again. In the following weeks, the terminations were intense and profoundly rewarding. I took an active role in reorganizing CorpTech, working side by side with Auriclia to identify the talents that had been stifled by the former group. We promoted Sarah Shen, a brilliant developer whose innovations Brad had repeatedly claimed as his own. Sarah's first act as the new VP of Product Development was to release 3 projects that had been shelved for political reasons. These 3 projects would eventually become the company's core products. We also promoted Marcos Johnson, a member of the sales team who had always been ignored despite his exemplary performance. He replaced Ryan as VP of Sales, and with his authentic approach to clients, he managed to rebuild relationships that had been destroyed by Ryan's aggressive tactics. The transformation in the company culture was impressively fast once the toxic elements were removed. Employee satisfaction increased 20% in the first month alone. Productivity skyrocketed, and for the first time in a long time, people were smiling in the hallways. During the presentation, 4 weeks after the terminations, I ran into Amanda at Westlake Coffee, a small cafe near the CorpTech offices. I had just left a meeting with the new finance team and stopped to grab a coffee before heading back to headquarters. She was alone, looking distractedly at her latte. As soon as she saw me, she looked up and asked if she could sit with me. Against my better judgment, I accepted. Amanda looked tired. That former haughty confidence had vanished.
She told me things with Brad were bad. After the firing, he had become bitter, drinking too much, blaming everyone but himself. She discovered he had lied about several things: his career, finances, and accomplishments. The man she thought was secure and successful was nothing but smoke and mirrors. I listened to everything in silence. When she finished, she reached out to touch my hand. I gently moved it away. Amanda then said she had made a mistake ending our marriage. She suggested that perhaps we could try again, now that I had found a better work-life balance. But her words made it clear that she still didn't understand what truly happened between us. She saw my success as something that pulled me away from her, not as something we could have built together. I told her I wished her the best, but that I had already moved on. My voice was calm but firm. It wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about recognizing that some chapters truly close. As for Brad, I learned he was struggling to get a new job at the same level. His reputation preceded him, not because I personally tried to harm him, but because other corp tech executives, when contacted for references, told their experiences honestly. Actions have consequences. And while I took no pleasure in seeing anyone suffer, not even Brad, there was a certain poetic justice in watching him face the results of his own actions. I hoped he would learn something from it one day, but that would be his choice. The most unexpected thing was receiving a message from Greg Peterson, one of Brad's former friends. Unlike the others, he seemed genuinely remorseful. He asked for a chance to apologize in person. We met for coffee, and he seemed sincere. He said he got carried away by Brad's influence, compromising his own values in exchange for acceptance and professional status. Not as an excuse, but as context for the mistakes he now deeply regretted. I didn't rehire him, but I offered references so he could find a more suitable position at another company. Some people deserve second chances, just not in the same environment where they failed. 6 months later, CorpTech Solutions had completely transformed. The stock value increased by 62%. Employee retention reached the highest level in the company's history, and 2 new products developed by teams that were previously ignored under Brad's management were successfully launched. My view of success had also changed. The satisfaction of seeing good numbers on the quarterly balance sheet didn't compare to the joy of seeing people flourish in a healthy environment. After all this, I decided to create a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, sharing the lessons I learned from both my successes and my failures. I also found a healthier balance in my own life. 3 days a week, I left the office at 5 p.m., regardless of what was still pending. I started rock climbing. I joined an amateur soccer league and reconnected with friends I had neglected during the years I lived as a workaholic. It was through the soccer league that I met Diana, a pediatric surgeon with a sharp sense of humor and absolutely no interest in corporate politics. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's passions. Unlike Amanda, Diana saw my ambition as a virtue, something to be channeled, not suppressed. And unlike how I was with Amanda, I made sure to let Diana know that she was more important than any professional success. Looking back at that night at the restaurant when Brad mocked me, I realized something profound. If he had treated me with respect, I might never have decided to get so directly involved with CorpTech. His cruelty inadvertently created the circumstances for his own downfall, and, at the same time, opened the doors for changes that benefited hundreds of people. The revenge, which initially felt so sweet, ended up being less satisfying than the positive transformations that followed. The company thrived not because I settled a score, but because by removing toxic leadership, I unleashed the potential that was always there. The most valuable lesson I learned wasn't about justice or revenge. It was about understanding that true success comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. Brad failed not for lack of talent or opportunity, but because he built his success at the expense of others. I won not by defeating him, but by creating an environment where everyone could contribute and be recognized. Today, looking toward the future, I carry this wisdom with me. External validation and material success are fleeting, but inner peace and positive impact remain. Whether in business or personal life, how we treat people determines not only their experience, but the legacy we leave in the world.
Reddit of the Day comment. Ah, the good old corporate karma. The guy was mocked for being unemployed, but he owned the company. Brad and co. wanted to look powerful. They ended up being escorted out by security. Moral of the story? Be careful who you look down on. Sometimes the failure is the one signing your paycheck.